So let's get started with the new OverSimplified video. Today we're going to be doing the Pig War. This is a conflict that I am a little bit aware of. It is technically within my area of study, but I wouldn't really consider it as big of a thing that, I wouldn't blame you if you studied the stuff that I studied and didn't know much about the Pig War. It's not so much of a war as it is an almost war. It's just like we're perpetually, as Americans, we're perpetually almost getting into conflicts throughout our history, and sometimes we actually get into conflicts. This is one of those almost conflicts where wiser heads prevailed eventually, but this could have resulted in the Third Great War between the Americans and the British in a century after the founding of the country. Like we had that first war, we had the War of 1812. This would be the third big war there, and it's kind of a Cold War. In a way, like the troops were in position, they were ready to attack, and it just didn't happen. This is not to be confused with like an emu war type thing. It's a bit more serious than that. But I wouldn't have been surprised if this fell under the mini war category. However, there is a broader political conflict that I'm very excited to see if he incorporates into this. This is all about the United States defining its borders. For its entire existence, its borders were uncertain and seemed as if they could perpetually spread. Then we're starting to hit the ocean, and we're starting to get a more definite border, and it's starting to fit more what it looks like today, which that's a big part of what the Pig War is about defining the northwest border, which is a really interesting one. Hey, Bird Mom's back.
Hi.
Hello.
I just forgot something.
Oh, you're not joining us today?
No, it's out.
We're about to watch a OverSimplified video.
Yeah, have fun with that.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blast. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't just get it started, except for the fact that the bird's probably gonna scream the second she leaves the room. So we're gonna we're gonna give her a minute. Actually, I'm gonna keep you guys waiting. You got to wait for the good things. We waited a long time for another OverSimplified video. We can wait a few more minutes, right? I think we're going to be okay. But the Pig War, if he really wants to blow this up into a much larger thing, if he really wants to take in all of the factors, this could include a whole lot. This could include the Mexican-American War, which would be pretty silly for him to do a video and call it the Pig War and have it include the Mexican-American War, but the Pig War is what gets top billing in that. That would be a rather silly thing for him to do, but not something that I think he's necessarily above doing, taking this like big conflict that defined so much of the Southwest United States and kind of trivializing it by giving it a backseat position to the Pig War, which is like a sub-conflict between the much larger conflict of the United States versus the British in defining the Northwest, which I hope that's what this is about. I hope this is going to include... I hope that's why it's so long. It includes the Mexican-American War, but he wasn't willing to give it top billing. That would be ideal.
Bye.
All right. See ya. Everybody say bye to Bird Mom. She'll probably check in with the chat at some point today.
Yeah, I'll try.
If we're... she's the Bird Mom, but she's also the Bird Mod. All right, so
Okay.
we'll catch you later.
Bye.
It's okay, bud. He doesn't like it when people leave. So, we got 50 people in chat now, so I think it's about time that we get started with this video. All right. Oh, sorry. I need to actually click on this. There we go. Now it's my active thing. I'm still learning how to stream. Let's do it.
Video was made possible by NordVPN. Click the link below to stay safe online and get a huge discount off a 2-year plan with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Trouble sleeping? Need someone to snuggle? Then why not snuggle? Me! The limited edition OverSimplified plushie is available for pre-order for a few days only. Get it quick along with some beautiful new character pins. Look at us, boys. We've only gone and bloody done it. We beat the Brits and secured independence. Now to expand westward and conquer the rest of the continent. Thomas? It looks like a bunch of different people already live out west. What? Oh no, that means we can't expand.
Yeah, right.
I hate my life. Whoa, whoa, whoa. I didn't say they were white people.
Well, depending on when this is, like, you got some French people out there, so, you know, Thomas Jefferson's fond of the French, though those are dirty French living in the woods, so maybe he's not as fond of them as he is fond of the sophisticated French people who live in Paris. I know Thomas Jefferson's a man of the people, but also an elitist at the same time, so it's hard to put your put yourself in his shoes, because he's just such an enigma. So who knows how he felt about that, but yeah, nothing really stopped Americans from spreading. The issue, naturally, this comes up all the time when it comes to expansion. Slavery has to come up. There were theories around slavery that it, as a system, could only thrive if it were constantly expanding. So you would need new land all the time. So wealthy slave owners are clamoring for more land, more opportunity, and people who are looking to stake their claim are also doing the same thing.
At the end of the Revolutionary War, when the United States secured its independence from Great Britain, the two sides met in Paris to settle the terms. Among various things, they discussed American territorial gains, and the British granted them a generous amount of land out west. However, Benjamin Franklin appeared to have an additional fascination. Oh, Canada. So voluptuous. You think we can maybe acquire some of that? Quit ogling our territory. But look at those curves. I'd worry less about Canada's curves and more about your own curves, Benjamin.
Ooh.
Many in America suggested that one day, the Canadian colonies should become a part of the United States. In response, Britain suggested that many in America should shut the hell up. Well, if Britain wasn't going to give up Canada, then the two sides had to agree on where to put their border. Easy.
The issue of the U.S.-Canadian border is actually much more complicated than it seems to be, given that despite, like, the fact that we joke with each other, the United States and Canada are on pretty good terms, but our border is actually very well defined considering how long it is. You'll see that if you walk along the border at the top, there are trees like cut out that like define the US Canadian border. Like we have a vast forest, and you'll just have like lines of trees that are cut out in order to define where the borders begin and the other one ends, which it's really an interesting thing. And Americans have clamored for Canadian land since the beginning. Early in the American Revolution, Benedict Arnold had a campaign in Canada, and they wanted to take Canada, and Canada is always like this looming British threat to this American ideal, which wants to be like British but better. But all these old British people still have a claim in here.
Easy enough for the most part. Follow some existing borders, add in a few rivers and lakes, maybe even a parallel for good measure. But then there was a question. What would happen here? Straight line, straight line. And so
Straight
it
line,
was.
yeah.
The border would go from the northwesternmost point of this perfectly oval-shaped lake and continue in a straight line westward until it met the Mississippi River. Perfect. Or was it? Well, as it
This is a good explanation of what happens when you settle a place naturally versus when you settle a place like preemptively. In the West, there's not a lot of people beyond these points, so when they end up carving out a lot of land, they have a little bit more room to have more rational shapes. You'll find that a lot of the shapes in like the old colonies, they took a very natural state because that's just how they settled into that with the people around them over time. Every little bit was hashed out as they went along. But a lot of these states that you'll see emerge in the West, you'll find there's a lot of rectangles, a lot of straight lines. A lot of it is a little bit easier to follow. So drawing a border in a place where a lot of people haven't settled yet, it becomes a little bit easier to just do a straight line.
Turned out, the lake didn't actually look like this, but like this. And the Mississippi wasn't here, but here. So in the end, none of that made even the slightest bit of sense. Don't blame the founding fathers. They were just using the best map available. Blame the guy who made it. But to the minds of the day, the issue had been solved. And it was finally time to start getting along. Oh, back to war they go. The Glorious War of 1812 saw the Americans try to invade Canada, and the British burn down the White House. But when all was said and done, it was...
Americans don't have a very good track record fighting Canadians, or... You know, it's... I'm going to call them Canadians, even though it's kind of a gray area as to, like, when you would say they firmly become Canadian. And when do they stop being British and become Canadian? I don't know. But for the purposes of this, I will throw the word Canadian around a lot, just for simplicity's sake.
Pretty much a draw. And once again, America and Britain had to...
Some people are not going to be happy about you saying it's pretty much a draw. I would say that the Americans killed it in marketing after the war. We totally... we made it look like we won. In a lot of ways, conflict resolution is defined very much by marketing. So you could say we did a pretty good job at that, but we didn't gain anything. We lost a lot. There weren't a lot of major British concessions, so I wouldn't call it necessarily a victory by any means. And I suppose you could say that the British won because they didn't lose anything. And that's really all they were trying to do here. They were just trying not to lose anything. So I lean towards the British winning. But sometimes I kind of understand in an abstract way what you mean when you say it was pretty close to a tie. Because not a lot was gained either way either. So that's the reality. Not much was gained either way. We can throw around win or lose all we want, but in reality, just not a lot was gained by anybody.
Enter into peace negotiations. By now, both sides realized the original border they came up with was a piece of hot garbage. And since America had also recently obtained a huge amount of land from Napoleon, they decided they would need to re-examine the border issue. Straight line, straight line.
Straight line.
So it was. To fix the problems of the previous border agreement, they decided to go from the northwesternmost point of this lake, as had been previously agreed, down to the 49th parallel, and from there the line would go straight as an arrow up until the Rocky Mountains. But beyond the Rockies, the two sides couldn't quite agree on where it would go next, because both sides claimed that territory beyond the Rockies was theirs. See,
so Americans, a lot of Americans thought they would... It was kind of a pipe dream, but some thought we would have all of America at some point. But this is what we were really pushing for at the time. This would have put us, what a lot of people were pushing for, puts us pretty close. I think some people even wanted it a little higher, but it would put us pretty close to like modern day Alaska, which would have been a much different... which would make us a much different country, taking one of our distant states and attaching it to the mainland. That would change pretty much everything, and it would deny Canadians access to the Atlantic Ocean, not the Atlantic, sorry, the Pacific Ocean, which that's a game changer. So geographically, this is an incredibly important conflict. I know I kind of trivialized it at the beginning, but it's more the pig war thing, because this whole thing isn't the pig war. This is kind of like the War of the Bucket, where he talked about a lot of stuff that was happening around the War of the Bucket, but we can all kind of acknowledge that the bigger stuff was happening around it rather than the War of the Bucket itself. The bucket wasn't the big part, but it's kind of like this comedic thing to frame everything around. So I'd imagine this is going to be a similar narrative.
Throughout its early history, America as a nation had its eyes heavily fixated on all that juicy land out west, ripe for invasion. I mean, settlementation. America wanted to expand.
I think that's supposed to be Daniel Boone.
Not only was it their right, some believed it was a destiny given to them by God himself.
Or maybe it's just
to
a
multiply
guy.
and spread across the continent, like rats or disease. Okay, guys, just
This is manifest destiny, like the idea that God chose Americans were the chosen people to, I guess, create this great land, spread it from sea to shining sea. You see where I go there? And we've always had that. We have another idea called American exceptionalism, where we kind of inherently think that we're better than other countries, even though a lot of our actions don't really differentiate us too much from other imperial powers. But like, we've always had ways of being like, it's okay because we're doing it, and this is just the way they did it at the time.
Just before we take over everything, God definitely said this is what we're meant to do, right? Yeah, that's what he said, right? Isn't that what he said? And who was it who spoke to God? It was Billy, right? I thought it was Sharon's cat. I hear voices all the time. Well, it was one of us. There's no way we made this whole thing up to justify our ruthless collective imperialist tendencies. Yeah! All right. Well, in that case, let's get out there and make the world a better place, just as God intended.
At the buffalo.
This belief in divinely destined expansion.
The American buffalo is still around, but it was like very endangered. You're not going to see a whole lot of them in the wild. I think I don't know if their population is currently on an uptick or not. I'm not the best person to ask about that. But I used to think that the American buffalo was like completely extinct. No, they're still around, but we've really devastated their population.
Would later be given its very own name, Manifest Destiny. But America wasn't the only one interested in controlling the Western territories. At the time, Canada was made up of a number of colonies, collectively referred to as British North America. This one over here was owned by the Hudson's Bay Company, a British charter company dedicated to turning as many beavers as possible into as many felt hats as possible, as quickly as possible.
Felt hats?
And the indigenous people became a key supplier. As a result, the British were also eager to control the land out west and secure that region's valuable resources, and in particular, the Great Columbia River was deemed vital to the beaver business. So when it came to the question of what would happen to the border beyond the Rockies, the conversation went a little like this. The line should keep going straight because we're manifestly destined to gain the...
But you see the problem with the straight line already. See this little piece of land right over here? It's like kind of an island. You're cutting that right in half. That adds some additional conflict right there by keeping the line straight and not allowing for it to be a little bit more complex.
The line should keep going straight because we're manifestly destined to gain the entire North American continent. No, we need this river so we can keep scalping beavers. Look, why don't we just draw the border along the river? That way we both have access to it. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise that protects the interests of both parties. And there's no way I'm ever going to agree to it! Having come to a roadblock.
So we're the Americans and the British, they have a mixed history of conflicts throughout the short history of the United States. So what are the chances of there being a problem and military action is taken and we get into all-out war? Like, what are the chances of the British winning? What are the chances of the Americans winning? I think that's an amazing alternate history subject and maybe one I'm not fully prepared for. But this is a very different United States from the War of 1812. That is definitely worth acknowledging. So we're not the United States of 1776. We don't have the support of the other major European powers in the same way. So we don't have that, but we're also militarily far more powerful than we were in the War of 1812. So this would be a completely different conflict than the previous two. And geographically, this is complex here. It's very far from the British mainland. They'd have to rely very much on colonial soldiers. Who'd win? I'm not entirely sure, because I know a lot of the conflict might end up carrying over into the rest of the country, and then like on the East Coast, if the British decide they want to attack somewhere else, they would have access there. But like having access to the disputed territory might be a little harder for the British than the Americans in a lot of ways.
Both sides simply agreed that for now, they would jointly occupy the Northwestern Territory. They were both free to settle and trade there. But rest assured, the agreement was only temporary. Eventually somebody would get their way. Listen, Yank, we can jointly occupy this land, but I ain't sharing anything else. I don't want to see you using my toothbrush. I don't want to catch you wearing my underwear. And I don't want to catch you using my computer and selling my data to advertisers. Well, then you, my friend, should use NordVPN.
So I've been skipping ads, but this ad is absolutely active. This promo code still works, so I'm just gonna sit back and watch the ad.
What the fuck? Do you like giving strangers your passwords to your most important online accounts? Me neither.
Hey
And that's
Rachel,
why
thank
I
you for
use
joining us today.
NordVPN. NordVPN has thousands of secure servers in over 60 countries, allowing you to safely surf the net at the fastest speed possible. It works across all your devices, so you're protected on the go, even 6 of them simultaneously. And it's super easy to use. With just a click of a button, you can head on over to South Korea and watch every single BTS video known to mankind. With NordVPN, you no longer need to worry about those shady websites, annoying pop-ups, or undesired eyes spying on your browsing history. And you can even unlock content that's been blocked in your country, like this video. It even comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So why not go to nordvpn.com/oversimplified to get a 2-year plan with a huge discount, plus an additional month for free. And as always, you'll be supporting my channel. So thank you. Now where were we?
Where were we indeed?
Bickering over boundaries,
So right now,
Now where were we?
I think what year are
Bickering
we at? I think we're not quite in the Mexican-American War yet, but that's going to be one of the big. We're not in the Mexican-American War yet, but that's going to be one of the big things that's going to really show off the American military might and kind of show how much we don't want this to turn into this massive conflict.
Over boundaries, manifesting destiny, and a joint occupation of Oregon. And one man living here who felt the territory should be British was James Douglas, the Hudson's Bay Company's no-nonsense chief factor at Fort Vancouver. Ah, what a beautiful, unspoiled corner of the British Empire. I've got my spotted dick, my Spice Girls fan club membership, and an unrelenting negative outlook on life that affects everyone around me. What are you looking at, Stephen? Yes, truly British.
Oof, he's...
What the?
Yeah!
The problem for men like Douglas
Americans and their non-culture, even today, some more elitist Europeans don't care for the fact that they don't believe that America is all that they don't believe that it has all that much of a culture. And at the time, a European elitist probably like that would have not been all too fond of something like this. It would really spoil his idea of what I guess what a civilized person should be. I guess that it's hard to explain how a place could lack a culture, because everything that defines a place is its culture. But it is something that people tried to argue, and it's hard for me to articulate because like it's just so hard to put myself in their mind from back then.
Eric.
Oh.
Americans had already begun streaming up the Oregon Trail. Gunslinging, howdy neighboring, diarrhea having.
Or
By
bison.
the thousands, they were pouring into the Oregon Territory in search of land to settle and farm. This, however, crowded out the fur trade, and eventually, a very bitter Douglas and the other Hudson's Bay traders at Fort Vancouver were ordered to relocate north to a new base of operations. But the Americans keep coming and they don't stop coming. Hopped in their wagons and they hit the ground running. Didn't make sense to keep sharing Oregon when they outnumbered the Brits more than 6-1. And suddenly, the whole joint occupation deal was being called into question. Newly elected President Polk maintained that America had an obvious claim to the entire region, even implying a possible war with Britain.
54 or fight. Yeah, that was the slogan. Like if we didn't get
obvious claim to the entire region,
like that's
even implying a possible.
That's where they wanted the border to be drawn. That would have been wait, 50 or 54 or fight. I believe that would have been a little bit more north of what it actually is. Currently, I think off the top of my head, it's hard to recall. James K. Polk, he's an interesting inclusion that you don't see a whole lot of when it comes to American presidents. He's definitely the most successful one-term president ever. If you define him based on like, hey, he says he's gonna do this, and then he went and did it. He had like 4 things he wanted to do when he got into office. He did all 4 of them and was like, hey, I'm not running for president again because I did everything I wanted to do. I mean, if that's not a successful president, I don't know who is.
Possible war with Britain. Fiery language from U.S. senators declared that American rifles would annihilate the Hudson's Bay Company in Oregon, and America even gave Britain notice that it was pulling out of the joint occupation agreement. The British were alarmed as the two sides stood on the brink of war. But in the end, neither truly wanted to fight. The British favored maintaining good economic relations, while the Americans had already gotten themselves into a war with Mexico. So after a bit of back and forth,
the Americans kind of provoked the Mexican-American War to get more land, it seems. There are alternative arguments here, but it seems like they kind of just pushed for the war because they wanted the land and they knew they could take it. And they won the Mexican-American War real easy. It wasn't that hard at all.
The British finally said, fine, you wanted a straight line? There's your straight line. And so, the agreement was made. The border would continue directly to the Strait of Georgia, but because the British insisted they keep Vancouver Island, it would then move south through the center of the channel and on to the Pacific Ocean. Finally, the issue of the northwest border had been solved.
Not quite.
Hold the phone. Discrepancy detected. Enhance frame.
Look at all that little stuff right there.
200%.
Where is it drawn?
Enhance. Enhance. Nope. Too far. Perfect. Now, show me the exact wording of the treaty. The line of boundary goes to the middle of the channel, and thence southerly through the middle of said channel? But there's loads of channels. So, you tell me, dear viewer, which channel is the treaty referring to? And therefore, who owns these islands? Is the wording of...
I mean, if I were making this argument, I would have wanted to get that for the Americans since they got the bottom half of this island, which the Americans did initially have a claim to. You'd think that the Americans would try to claim these as part of the treaty just to get a little something out of it. You've given up the island there. That's A-okay, but you can take these little things right there. You know, I think you have a decent enough argument behind that.
The treaty, maybe a little too vague? Well, that's exactly the problem encountered by the people living in the area. The British insisted that the channel intended by the treaty was the Rosario Strait, and therefore the islands were British. The Americans, on the other hand, argued that the intended channel was the Harrow Strait, and therefore the islands were American. At times, the debate became rather heated. Even the individuals who negotiated and signed the treaty at times didn't seem entirely sure which channel the treaty meant, and representatives from the Hudson's Bay Company begged them to make it clearer. But thousands of miles away, the people in power simply had more to worry about than some tiny islands in the middle of nowhere. Order! Order! Shut up! All right, listen up. We got a lot to get through. The 7th Earl of Chissingham says he encountered a foul beast in the fields of Upper Fardingdom late last night and put this sketch together? That's a poor person, Darren. Ugh, next, Lord Piddlingham says he has a new mole on his backside? How is that parliamentary business, George? Oh, some islands in the Pacific Northwest are in dispute and could lead to a war with America? Boring. Fine, let's take a look at that mole, George. And so, for now, the islands were simply held in dispute. Were they British or were they American? I'm sure this conflict won't cause anyone to die. And one man who thought the islands were undeniably British was James Douglas, now the governor of Vancouver Island. He had already once had a...
So he's going into more detail than one typically goes into in the Pig War. It's often like such a footnote when you teach this stuff, and that's why I'm really happy that he did this.
American settlers encroach on his territory and force him to move. And by golly, he wasn't going to let it happen again. As far as he was concerned, those islands were not only British, but prime agricultural land. And given the chance, those glubby Yanks wouldn't hesitate to start pitching flags with their glubby little hands. And so, he came up with a plan. If the British settled the islands first, then that would surely secure them for Britain. And so in 1853, Douglas sent an Irishman by the name of Charles Griffin, along with some Hawaiian shepherds, to go set up a sheep farm on San Juan Island. And set up a sheep farm they did. The place was rammed with sheep, 1,369 to be exact.
Sick.
But within those flocks of woolly cowards could also be found a number of beautiful, prized Berkshire pigs. Oh, Porky, you look stunning. You're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. Would you perhaps like to go to the island ball together tonight? Oink once for no. Roll around in that cow crap if yes. Yes!
Hell yeah.
I'm covered in poo and I'm the luckiest man alive! But life on the island for Charles Griffin wasn't to be a perfect paradise of pig pageants. Because unfortunately for him, the Americans also believed the island was theirs. One day, in 1854, an American customs collector was sailing around the islands on the outlook for bands of native tribesmen when he spotted something.
That chin strap looks familiar.
You now, you savages. Over yonder. Those are sheep, sir. Sheep, you say? What are they doing here? Let's go and negotiate with them. Negotiate with sheep? Are you crazy? I'm perfectly stable, you rat bag. Call me crazy again and I'll eat your eyes! Hello, good sir. We request to speak with your leader. Out of my way. Allow me to parley with this foul beast. Hey, stop threatening my sheep. Your sheep? You mean to tell me that you, a British subject, have illegally imported these sheep into American territory? I'll have you know that you, an American, are currently trespassing on British territory. The Americans felt that they were entitled to collect taxes on the British property, you know, because the island was American, and they threatened seizure if dues weren't paid. The British...
This is such a small thing. Like, this is a huge thing to the people who are, like, living on that level, and I can understand why the tax collector might get up in arms about it, but I don't think he can fully appreciate the scale of the potential conflict that he's about to cause. I'm very excited about this because I feel like I'm about to learn extra layers to this conflict that was always kind of a joke whenever I talked about it.
Meanwhile, threatened to arrest the Americans, you know, because the island was British, and the two sides were in a standoff. To give Charles Griffin the legal power to deal with the American trespassers, Douglas said, hey, put on this wig. Boom, you're a magistrate now. And in turn, Griffin went to one of his Hawaiian shepherds and said, hey, I'm making you a constable. Put on this badge. The British then went off to arrest the U.S. Customs inspector. But, being an American, he emerged from his tent with 4 pistols and a giant knife, so the Brits had to back down. Eventually, raids by northern tribes chased the U.S. officer from the island. But the Americans
guy not have a name?
done yet.
I want to know who he is.
Officials from nearby Whatcom County in Washington Territory believed the island fell under their jurisdiction, and they decided it was time to make the British pay up once and for all. They sent one Sheriff Barnes to go confront Charles Griffin. Hey, you owe us $80.33 for all this farm stuff you got here. Go suck an egg! Oh,
there you go.
I see. So that's how it is, huh? That's how it's gonna be, is it? That's the way in which things are, eh? That be how it will, is it? Will it be how that is, huh? That be the way in which things be the way they are, is that? Get off my property! So the...
This is... this is really dictating the amount of shtick that he does. Like, the scale of this conflict is, in reality, so small that it's allowing for a lot more shtick and funny to get into it, which I'm kind of down with. I'm here for the memes.
The sheriff and other Whatcom County officials felt they were now well within their rights to seize and auction off Griffin's sheep in order to recoup lost taxes. And who would they auction these prized breeding rams off to but themselves? Then, in a pretty chaotic scene, they worked to tie the rams to their boats. And when Charles Griffin came running to rescue his kidnapped sheep, being Americans, they pulled out guns on him, and he had to back down. In all, Charles Griffin lost 34 breeding rams, and he was furious. The British complained to the
Strange,
American
British people
government,
are pretty
who were
good at
shocked to hear what had been going on at their northwest
pulling
border,
out on somebody
and both
during this
governments
age.
told their officials in the
I don't know.
area to back off. We're not trying to start a major war over some dumb sheep and a stupid island. But also, the islands are definitely ours. Under no circumstances let the other side have them. For now, both governments agreed to set up yet another boundary commission to decide which channel was the correct border. But it often devolved into petty bickering. The British did make one interesting suggestion, though. We could draw the border through this middle channel and split the islands between us. Well, that would be a completely fair compromise that protects the interests of
We're
both
not gonna
parties.
do it.
And there's no way I'm ever gonna agree to it! And in the aftermath of the sheep raid, James Douglas, still stationed at Fort Victoria, became even more cautious of American encroachment into his territory. Mr. Douglas, sir, it appears an Indian has discovered gold in the Fraser Canyon, just north of here. Shut up! Keep your voice down, boy. We can't risk those glubby Americans hearing about this, or our territory here will be infested with them. Oh no!
Yes. I love that they're just all cowboys and frontiersmen. I mean, they would be frontiersmen,
The
but
Fraser Canyon Gold Rush attracted a heap of Americans to the region. Some got lucky. Most did not. And of those that didn't, rather than returning all the way home, many simply decided to settle in the area. And in particular, the juicy green pastures of San Juan Island were rather appealing. Believing the island was American territory, around a dozen American settlers moved there in the late 1850s. One of them was a man named Lyman Cutler, a young man in his mid-20s, and lazy as pie. He didn't want to have to clear a space in the forest to build his home, so he said, I'll just build my cabin right in the middle of this British sheep run. I'm sure that won't make anyone mad. When he planted potato seeds in his garden, rather than building a nice protective fence around them, he said, I'll just fence in 3 sides and hope all these British farm animals have a moral compass and respect my property rights.
and here comes the... Yeah.
Griffin's pig was a Berkshire, well known for rooting.
Oh
and
no,
Lyman's
not the
fairly
pig!
pathetic fence made for a bad combination.
Just figure
Numerous
out what's
times
gonna
he had
happen.
to chase the pig away from his property, and he once angrily marched up to Griffin's home, saying, Hey, British farm idiot, keep your stupid pig out of my potatoes. It is
Keep
up to
your pig
you
out of my
to
potato-
keep your potatoes out of my pig. Griffin was furious with his new American neighbors. They built their homes all over his sheep pastures. And besides, what right did they have to be here anyway? It was British territory. Lyman, on the other hand, swore the local government had assured him his land claims were legitimate, and so to him, the British were out of line. Look at that sick freak. In love with his pig. Isn't that just sick? Yeah, what a freak. Not like our love, Spuddy. Ours is all natural. Yep, just a man and his potato. Nothing wrong with that. But the
I think
tension
both things are
between Lyman
perfectly
and Griffin
natural.
was just about to explode. What the?
I don't know.
Spuddy? All right, you damn dirty pig. That's the final straw.
And this is why they call it the pig war. It's one of those things where they didn't actually almost fight for that. Yeah, they did. And when it comes, there really is no civil authority that lords over both sides of this conflict here. So naturally, they're going to have to sort it out together, which has the potential to go much bigger because you have these people who are way bigger than the conflict at hand making decisions on this. Therefore, it has more opportunity to snowball into something worse. Like, realistically, you would like it if this could be handled by lower level civil authorities, but there's nothing there. There's nothing that can mediate between the British and Americans at this stage. Nobody has the authority to do so until you get to like the higher levels.
Lyman shot the pig. After taking a second to calm down, he felt bad about murdering Griffin's prized boar. So he went to him and said, "Hey man, look, I kinda just killed your pig. It was eating my potatoes again, and I don't know, man, I kinda just killed your pig. Killed your pig. Killed your pig."
Dude, I can see why this one took so long. Put a lot into it.
You swine! No, the swine is the one I killed. I'm Lyman. Griffin demanded Lyman pay $100 for the loss of the pig, an outrageous sum at the time. Obviously, Lyman refused, threatening to shoot any more animals that dared enter his property, even threatening to shoot Griffin himself. When Griffin complained to James Douglas, British officials went and confronted the pig killer. Again, they insisted he pay up, and if he didn't,
they don't have
Lyman
authority
claimed they
over him.
threatened to arrest him and take him back to Victoria.
But then they're essentially, in the eyes of the Americans, kidnapping an American. These British people are seizing American citizens now. That's how they're going to market it. Each side is righteous in their own minds.
British officials arresting an American on American soil and trying him under British law. Now that's controversial. And it's a controversy that attracted the attention of an American general in charge of the Department of Oregon, one William S. Harney. This guy, General Harney, had a reputation. He's the kind of guy who invades Mexico without orders, wasting valuable resources and creating an embarrassing situation for everyone involved. He's the kind of guy who has one of his own men arrested for writing the wrong header on a report. He's the kind of guy who finds a dog digging up his yard and then chases it for 1.5 miles just to give it a beating. He hated superiors, hated being told what to do, and had been court-martialed 4 times for disobeying orders. Contemporaries described him as an imbecile, all matter and no mind, an arrogant humbug, and a laughingstock. Like I said, General Harney had a reputation. He hated the
suppose he
British
did.
and was out for any opportunity to earn personal glory for himself. By some accounts, he even wanted to become president. And so, in July 1859, when he...
You know, it's not too far from possibilities. I mean, we got Zachary Taylor, who comes out of the Mexican-American War and becomes president. So, like, you know, after major military conflicts, military figures stand a pretty good chance in American politics.
He happened to visit San Juan Island, and he learned of the plight of the Americans living there, the shooting of a pig, and the British threat to arrest Lyman Cutler. General Harney went into scheme mode. Hey, yo, Captain Pickett. Yes, sir. Listen carefully. I need you to go pick up some flowers and bring them to my place later. I've got a plan. Here I am, sir. What's the plan? Pickett, you and I are going to start a war. What do you mean, sir? Okay, listen up. An American man shoots a worthless pig on San Juan Island, and the British threaten to arrest him. Outrageous, but we can use it. We get the settlers there to send us a petition saying they need American troops for protection. That's when you go with your men and occupy the island. The British will find American troops on an island they consider theirs so offensive, they won't hesitate to blow you to smithereens. Then, it's war. We bring in reinforcements and we fight back. I'll write to Washington, D.C., letting them know what's happening. But here's the kicker. My letter will take 6 whole weeks to get there.
So Zachary Taylor, Neron, it's very normal that you don't know who Zachary Taylor is. During this period, a lot of the presidents go forgotten. Even Polk, who was considered a very successful president, isn't particularly well known in our history. Zachary Taylor, he's One of his biggest claims to fame, of course, is his involvement in the Mexican-American War. That's a big one. And that's mostly what people focus on when they talk about the guy. They hardly talk about his presidency. It's not like he didn't do anything in his presidency, but they hardly talk about him. And he died before his presidency was over. Some believe he was poisoned, but I don't know about that. That would make him the first American president to be successfully assassinated, but I think that's people kind of reaching for the more interesting thing when in reality he just kind of got sick and died.
Before the government even gets a chance to respond, telling me I'm an idiot and ordering me to cease fire, the island will be ours. Hell, we could even invade Vancouver Island or British Columbia. It's foolproof. Wow, very impressive, sir. But I gotta ask, why? Well, I'll level with you, Pickett. Historians still contest exactly what it is I'm trying to do here. It's possible I'm trying to expand America's territory. Maybe I'm trying to play the hero so I can become president. Some have even suggested that since I'm a slave-owning Southerner, I may be trying to create a diversion to help the South secede in the upcoming Civil War. But if there's one thing that almost everyone can agree on, it's that I'm an idiot. I see. But hold on, what'd you tell me to bring flowers for? Because, Pickett.
So the first two seem very plausible. I don't know too much about the guy. It seems like the Southern secession idea, that I don't think from what we're learning about him he had that level of forethought where he saw the secession coming in the form that it happened. I think that's a lot of us knowing what's gonna happen and kind of working back from our conclusion, but I don't know. Maybe that's possible, but those first two seem absolutely possible.
But hold on, what'd you tell me to bring flowers for? Because, Pickett. They're pretty and I like them! There are also historians who believe that Harney and Pickett had no secret plan at all, and were not scheming masterminds, but simply hot-headed buffoons, genuinely outraged at the audacity of the British, and trying to protect American citizens. But the fact of the matter is, Pickett took the very controversial and extremely provocative act of landing American troops on disputed territory. He set up his camp in a very exposed position and erected a very provocative sign proclaiming that only American laws applied on the island. It was almost like he was asking to be fired upon. Or, again, maybe he was just an idiot. When a British official sent to the island to get rid of the unruly American settlers now saw that there were American troops, he demanded they leave. He was obviously told to go suck an egg. When Douglas found out, he was enraged. To him, the American landing constituted an invasion. Harney sent a report back to the War Department in D.C., justifying his actions with exaggerated claims of British villainy. But he knew it would take 6 weeks to get there, and another 6 weeks for their reply to come back. For now, the situation was entirely in the hands of local military and government officials, and the ball was in the British court. Would the temperamental Governor Douglas and the powerful British Navy respond to the American provocation with force? Were Britain and America really about to go to war over the shooting of a pig? Well, if one man were to have his way, it's entirely possible they would. James Douglas had already had Americans force him out of Oregon. They had threatened his position in Victoria during the Gulf.
Well, it wouldn't be over the pig. In the end, like, when you think about it, this would have been a long time coming. This would have had decades of build. People would fixate on the fact that the pig was the final straw, but, you know, if they did end up going to war, it's because of decades of border disputes, just building up to the point where they're not willing to concede anymore. So it's funnier to say they'd be going to war over a pig, but as we have learned here and as we've talked about a good amount today, there's a lot of foundation there for war.
Gold Rush. Now they had invaded his island, and he had had it. It was time to turn to the Royal Navy. You, Captain Hornby, go to the island and prevent any more Americans from landing, and take this magistrate with you to arrest Captain Pickett. Use force if necessary. Just don't do anything to start a war. Wait.
That's a delicate situation.
Force, but not start a war? Oh, I'm sorry. Is that too much to ask, Princess? When Captain Hornby got to the island and saw that the American force there was even larger than expected, his concern grew. He sent word back to Douglas, who in response ordered even more ships to the island. And at this point, the naval officers were like, hey man, let's talk. They were concerned Douglas's escalation was leading them to war, and they convinced him it probably wasn't a terribly good idea to just go up to an American military captain with his armed men and say, hey bucko, you're under arrest. Please don't shoot me. Douglas gave in. To prevent any hostilities, he canceled all orders and told the Navy, for now, to simply keep an eye on the Americans. He did send one more ship for good measure. Captain Pickett, now seeing the British ships with their guns aimed directly at his exposed camp, said, see Jeff? Look at that. We're about to get blown to bits. All according to plan. Hang on. Oh crap, Jeff, we're about to get blown to bits! Pickett hastily moved
his animation has gotten so much better since the beginning of the stuff. Like, I know it's cartoonish and silly, but that's what he's going for. And like the way the characters like wiggle so much more than they used to in the early videos, just every bit of comedy just hits so much harder.
Camp from its very exposed position to another position, which, as it happened, was also very exposed. It probably won't surprise you to learn Pickett came dead last in his graduating class.
Oh,
Nearby
for real?
American and British officials began showing up to ask Pickett what the heck he was even doing. Then, a bunch of tourists showed up, because a major war breaking out in their doorstep was the single most exciting thing to ever happen in any of their miserable frontier lives. One Charles Griffin...
I mean, you hear stories going into like the Civil War and stuff where people get a blanket, lay it out on the grass where a battle's about to happen, and they have a picnic there, about to watch some people get mowed down in your hometown, so that's not surprising in the slightest.
Was particularly unhappy. First his pig had been shot. Now his sheep pastures were being trampled by soldiers and tourists alike. He complained to Governor Douglas, who was still pretty upset about the whole thing. Douglas felt British honor itself was at stake. So he decided that if American forces were allowed to be on the island, well then by golly, the British should be there too. It would be a joint military occupation. Upon hearing Douglas's
great
plan
idea
to land British troops on the island, Captain Hornby decided to go speak with Pickett in person. After informing him of the plan, Pickett replied that if they dared land, he would open fire. So there they were. The British had orders to land. The Americans had orders to prevent their landing. This was it. War. Over a small island in the middle of nowhere. Over a pig and some potatoes. Over whether the US-Canada border looked like this or like this.
You can't even see it.
It was stupid.
Kind of brilliant.
Hold on. This is stupid. To heck with it. I'm not landing those troops. I'm not gonna be the one who starts a war. The captain decided not to follow Douglas's order. And good thing he didn't, because pretty soon after that, the leading British admiral in the entire Pacific region showed up. Rear Admiral Baines outranked Governor Douglas. When he heard of everything that had been going on, he was stunned. But when he heard that Hornby had refused Douglas's plan to land troops, Baines could have kissed him. Whether he did or not, history doesn't tell. But I like to think they did. The Rear Admiral canceled all of Douglas's orders and instead pursued a policy of not interfering with the Americans until he could contact the British government. The Americans, not knowing the British no longer intended to land, had sent reinforcements and began fortifying. But even still, the British Navy did nothing. And finally, when word made it across the planet, informing the two governments of the ongoing crisis,
it still takes a long time for that to happen.
Was shocked. Holy crap! Harney landed troops on disputed territory? Man, I hope the British don't find out about this. Buchanan? Oh crap! The British! Why are we getting reports of American troops on San Juan Island? Whoa. I don't know, man. Nothing to do with me. But you're the president. What? Breckenridge? Am I the president?
So some time has passed here. We've gone through some presidents. And we have James Buchanan, who is not considered to be a very good president. Some lists put him at the bottom, and there's one or two, maybe three people I think might belong on that bottom three list here. James Buchanan, I totally understand why he is at the bottom. Under him, we had secession, which led to the Civil War. Lincoln, By the time he got in office, secession had already started under James Buchanan, and he's basically like, I have no way of doing anything about this, which he might have been right. Legally, it was a gray area as to whether or not he had the authority to stop secession. That's why it happened, though plenty of people agree that secession was legal. There are definitely arguments at the time that they consider the Union to be a temporary thing that they could pull out of. And James Buchanan just thought, like, I don't have the power to stop any of this. But yeah, the country broke into pieces on his watch, so he's not considered to be a particularly good president. He's considered to be a pretty good foreign diplomat, though. He did a pretty good job in Russia. He's been around for a while. He was a foreign diplomat during Andrew Jackson's time, and Andrew Jackson couldn't stand him. I've told this story before, but James Buchanan was sent to Russia, I believe, by Andrew Jackson because Andrew Jackson didn't like him. So what do you do when you have somebody who's in a position of power that you don't like? Well, you give him another job somewhere as far away from you as you could put him. So the job in Russia was considered sort of a way of getting rid of your political enemies. And that's how unpopular James Buchanan was in that time. And he ends up not being a very popular president when the time comes around.
Yes, sir. And hey, we got a problem. It looks like the southern states are considering seceding, and we're headed for the biggest crisis in the history of the nation. And it's your job to fix it, sir. Sir? Oh no.
Oh no.
Not the curtain again, Mr. President.
I'm not here.
Buchanan. Back in the Pacific Northwest, Harney was beginning to realize the government may not be terribly impressed with his reckless actions, so he began firing off even more aggressive letters, justifying what he had done. Tell him the British were sending bands of Indians to attack our men, and that they're big meanies with coal for hearts, and that they made me cry like a little girl. Wait, no, that makes me sound weak. They made me cry like a big girl. Yeah, that's it. When the president received Harney's new letters, his anxiety only grew stronger.
Fantastic.
Oh, crap. Hey, General Scott, please make this go away. Leave it to me, sir. General Winfield Scott was the commanding general of the entire U.S. Army.
Okay, this guy's a big deal. The other guys, they're kind of small fries in the American military. Like, Winfield Scott's a huge deal. And he gets a lot of power in the Mexican-American War. Like, he's really thrown into the public eye. And he's going to be around through the Civil War, though he's not going to be quite the military man he once was. So, but either way, big deal.
Well known for his negotiation skills, he was a veteran of the Mexican-American War, during which time he had had to deal with General Harney's idiocy and insubordination. And he watched as Harney got away with it all, thanks to his friends in high places. It's safe to say that Scott really did not like General Harney.
Andrew Jackson put a lot of less than ideal people in office. Andrew Jackson is a big proponent of the spoil system. You get in office and then you reward the people who helped you get in office with high government jobs and stuff. So he rewarded people who were loyal to him rather than people who were just best for the job. That's an Andrew Jackson thing. And James K. Polk was basically Andrew Jackson's chosen successor. So that's a thing.
In high places, it's safe to say that Scott really did not like General Harney. By now, General Scott was racked with gout, and he was so big he had to be hoisted onto his ship in a basket. Nevertheless, he began the long journey to the Pacific Northwest. Okay, everyone, get over here. Will somebody please tell me what the heck is going on? I'll tell you, General. It all started on one fateful day last summer. Spuddy? All right, you damn dirty pig. That's the final
flashbacks.
straw.
This is one of the greatest anime storylines I've ever seen.
Look at that pig.
He's gonna pull a gun, isn't
Nowhere
it?
left to run, eh? I'm gonna enjoy this.
Gonna do something.
Simon,
Oh,
if you spare my life, I grant you 3 wishes.
Morgan?
So you see, General, the pig wasn't even on his property when he shot it. Liar! He's lying to you, General. I'll tell you what really happened. What a pleasant summer's afternoon here on my humble farm. It's just me and my beloved potatoes. I'm so happy. Say, Lyman, them some nice spuds you got there. Would be a shame if somebody ate them. No, not again, you beast! Leave my potatoes alone! Yeah, I'm gonna eat them, Lyman. I'll eat them, and then I'm gonna eat you. Stay back!
He's eating
shoot.
them.
Go ahead, punk.
Now he's gonna eat
Make
me.
my day. Shoot me! Shoot me! He made me do it! He made me do it! So you're telling me you guys nearly started a war with the strongest naval power in the world over the shooting of a pig? Yeah, now he's starting to get it. Not only the pig, sir. The British then threatened to arrest this poor, pure American soul. Thank you, General. Shut up. I don't care about
This
you.
is so
Okay,
dumb.
I've made up my mind. You're an idiot. 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 You guys are fine. And you two are the most mind-numbingly brain-dead ding-dongs I've ever encountered in all my life, and I'll see you in my office. Okay, Harney?
So Winfield Scott, he actually has experience commanding on a very large scale. He's not like a nobody general. So he could probably, I would hope, unless this is about to somehow contradict me, and I didn't know that. Like, I don't know too much about his involvement in this, because it is such a footnote in this time's history that it's brilliant that he's going so deep into it. But you'd imagine he's able to understand the scale of this potential conflict much more than any of the people who are currently involved in it, who come off as petty and short-sighted.
Listen, I cut a deal with the Brits. Here's how it's gonna be. Both sides will maintain a small force on the island for a joint military occupation until our two governments can decide who owns the island. Now, the only way they'd agree to that is if Pickett is removed from command, so I'm replacing him with Captain Hunt here. Now, Harney, listen to me. Do not, under any circumstances, put Pickett back on that island, okay? I mean it, Harney. Do not order Pickett back onto the island. Understood?
And he's going to?
Yes, sir. Good. I'll see you, Globos, later. Is he gone? I think so. Good. Hunt, you're fired. Pickett, you're going back on the island.
Of course.
All right, you psychopath. I've been waiting years for this. I hate you. I've always hated you. Harney had not only ordered Pickett back onto the island, but his department even notified the British that it did not recognize the joint occupation settlement, while everyone else had decided on peace. Harney appeared to still be threatening war. Needless to say, a furious Winfield Scott soon removed him from command and sent him elsewhere. In Harney's absence,
hopefully to
the
Russia.
joint occupation went ahead, and the troops actually got along together quite well. The British attended 4th of July celebrations at the American camp, while the Americans visited the British for Queen Victoria's birthday.
That's so weird, the British attending a 4th of July celebration. I had a geography professor who is British, though he's lived in the United States for a very long time. He's an American citizen, I believe. But he's British, and he says that he like hides inside on the 4th of July because he's just like, this isn't for me. I consider myself an American, but I don't want to go out with this accent, which is a hilarious story to me.
Even Pickett became good friends with his British counterpart. War, it seemed, had been avoided, thanks largely to the level-headed actions of the Royal Navy and General Winfield Scott. Of course, the islands were still in dispute, and the question of who exactly owned them still had to be answered. That answer would have to wait, because while San Juan was at peace, the nation was tearing itself apart. When civil war broke out in 1861, the issue of San Juan just wasn't that important. Harney, despite being a Southerner, remained in the U.S. Army, but was eventually removed from command at St. Louis when his loyalty to the Union came under suspicion. More famously, Captain Pickett, a native Virginian, went on to become a Confederate general.
I'm curious, if they're going to tie this in, there is kind of this looming threat throughout the American Civil War that the British might help the Confederates gain their independence, which would be incredibly ironic. I don't know if that actually is going to come into play here, but that is something that you hear about every once in a while. It's hard because the British have a little bit of trouble justifying it. The only way reason they'd be doing that is to diminish the power of the United States, which would be a very French move of them, like the French during the American Revolution, where they really didn't have a ton to gain. It's more to slight the other power that could be a threat to them at some point down the line.
Its charge at the Battle of Gettysburg remains one of the most famous moments
of the
entire war and marked a major turning point. U.S. relations with Britain actually soured during the war. The British, missing their supply of southern cotton, initially looked like they may intervene on the side of the Confederacy. There was the Trent Affair, when Confederate diplomats were discovered and arrested on a British mail steamer. And then there were the British-built ships, sold to the Confederacy, that wreaked havoc on northern commerce. When the Civil War ended, furious American politicians called on the British to pay reparations. And by now, a long list of hot issues existed between them. And yes, on that list remained, 12 years later, still the issue of who owned these gosh darn islands. That issue, it was finally agreed,
Dude, it would be
submitted
better if those
to
islands just
international
fell into the
arbitration.
sea.
The Empire of Germany would decide, with the British and Americans presenting arguments. The American argument was reportedly presented with a little more pizzazz, a little more zing. And in the end, when the Germans made their decision, they awarded the San Juan Islands to the United States.
Yay!
When an
How nice
aging
of them.
Douglas heard the news, he said that there was no possible way the British argument had been presented correctly. But that was that.
What was that on the back of it?
British
10 reasons to dislike Germans.
argument had been presented correctly. But that was that. The British conceded. And on the 25th of
doing?
November, 1872, the last British troops left the island. As the Americans entered the British camp to raise their flag, they found that the British had removed the flagpole. One last up yours to Uncle Sam. By this time, Charles Griffin had already left the island, and the Hudson's Bay Company eventually sold their sheep farm. And so, there you have it. A
It's
dangerous
sorted.
situation
We'll never have another
that
border
almost brought
dispute.
two great powers to war, triggered by the shooting of a pig. But thanks to more level-headed minds and an eagerness for peace and cooperation, conflict was avoided. And the only casualty of this pig war was, well, just a pig. But how different could
Poor
things have
piggy.
been? What if the British had
He didn't
attempted
deserve
to
that.
arrest Pickett? What if they had landed troops? Could the two sides have actually gone to war? Could America have invaded Canada? Could it, perhaps, still invade Canada? Think about it. Why not? We have the manpower. We have the arms.
Oh,
It's
jeez.
our manifest destiny. Picture a future where American Mounties wear red, white,
American
and blue
Mounties, oh
and
my
hail
God.
the stars and stripes. Where Wayne Gretzky would wave the American flag every 4th of July in the streets of Montreal. Maple syrup, the greatest American food. Banff, the greatest American national park. One
My God.
united nation under the leadership of our glorious president, Drake. No longer shall we tolerate our smug
happening?
neighbors to the north with their affordable insulin and endless comments complaining that I don't talk about Canada enough in my videos. That's right.
You know what? I've found that anytime Canadians are slightly involved in a conflict and I leave them out, they get very upset. There is kind of like an ongoing Canadian complex that comes with their involvement in the telling of American history, which I would say is very rightful because they are often left out. Like when we talk about the American Revolution, very few people learn about how the Canadians kicked our butt during that brief period. Often the War of 1812 is downplayed, and we've talked about that already. So, like, I have seen this.
Right, Canadians, watch your backs. Sleep with one eye open tonight. Because Biden's coming, baby. And this time, he's coming with a vengeance!
That was the best conclusion I've ever seen in my life. Who's this? Who's this on screen? Charlie Hopkinson, voice of the pig. Are you okay? Okay, that's cool. I didn't notice there was any other voices in this. I didn't notice. Oh yeah, like was it when he was like the dude being like tough guy pig? Whatever. That was dumb, but like in a fun way. That was incredibly fun. That might be one of my favorite. Oh, you know, every time I watch an oversimplified video, it feels like every oversimplified video is my favorite oversimplified video until the next one, because who the hell is Drake? Drake is an American rapper no, not American. He's a Canadian rapper slash singer who's done very well in the United States. When we think of like Canadian pop stars, he's one of the people, like right up there with Justin Bieber. We think like, who are some famous Canadians we know in music? There are plenty of options, but we jump to like Drake and Justin Bieber, which, you know, that's a thing.